Hello and welcome back to Regenesis Sanctuary. I don't know if you guessed it right last time, but this time we are building for the giant panda. Last time we built this habitat for the red panda and I'm still quite happy with it, and I want to make the red panda habitat together with the giant panda habitat one large area that will be called the panda house. First off, I start by connecting the building with this walkway that runs along the giant panda habitat. From here, people will have a great view of the outside part of the habitat later on. Now I actually want to make two separate giant panda habitats because that's usually how they're being kept in real life as well. Giant pandas can be kept together, but when the female is pregnant or caring for little young, it is better to keep them separate. So we'll be doing just that. To create this building, I will have the guests walk up the stairs to a raised platform that looks down into the indoor area of the two habitats. Underneath the guest area will be a staff area where they can access the habitats. Next, I continue by extending the wall that we made for the red panda habitat along the edge of the giant panda habitat. Just like I did last time, I'll change up some of the decals so it looks a little less copy-pasted. And I'll add some ivy to make it look a little more interesting. Then I continue with building the actual building, starting by extending the plaster walls that I used for the other side of the building and basically just creating a giant cube. Now it doesn't look like much yet, but I'll swear I'll improve on it in a bit. On the inside, I'll actually raise up the terrain a little bit to make building the habitat borders a little bit easier. I add some walls to this inside area to create a border to the habitat, and then I'll add the actual habitat borders and gates. After dividing this space in half to separate the two habitats, I start cleaning it up a little by bordering this staircase in more plaster. I do think this stairs area creates the perfect first little viewing point for the inside area of the pandas, so I decide to make a glass window in this curve. These large square holes in the middle of the path will create the main viewing area for the guests, which is why I'll be adding large glass windows again. Giant pandas are usually a pretty popular animal in the zoo, so it's a good idea to create plenty of viewing points, so it doesn't get too cramped for people. There is actually a lot of space up here, so I decided to put down some seats for an animal talk, as well as some drink stands, food stands, a toilet building and a souvenir stand, so the guests can refresh themselves here and sit down and have a look at the pandas. Now that the basics of the building were done, I actually lost inspiration for a little bit, so I focused on this little hallway for a while. I started off by copying some of the education signs over from the red panda habitat and putting them on the wall here. Then I found these nice posters and put some of those up as well. Of course, we don't want people to get in contact with the giant pandas by accident, so it's important to create a barrier in between them. For this, I used these red pillars with some of the fencing in the same style I did for the bridge. I did also add some glass in between here just to make sure that people are not gonna start throwing food or anything like that. After I made a piece that I was happy with, I copied it along the length of this little path. I wasn't all that happy with the concrete floor, so I decided to cover it in some of these wooden planks. Then I cleaned up some of the edges with this Asian wood. I put some more stuff on the smaller wall over here, and I put down some benches because after this area was finished, it seemed like the perfect area for people to just sit down and chill for a bit. Finally, I added this door to go to the staff facilities, and then it was time to continue on with the rest of the building. I decided to delete like half the pathing that I made earlier to change it up a little bit. I wanted this building to be kind of symmetrical, so I decided that I wanted the visitor entrance to be in the middle. For this, I made a stairs going downward that started halfway through the building, then straightened out a bit more, and then continued outside of the building. From the straight piece of flooring in the middle, I did add the paths to the side again for more viewing area for the guests. But because this was a little lower now, I did have to lower the glass panels a bit as well. Now of course the pandas also need to be able to access this building, so that's what these two holes are for. Then I cleaned up the stairs a bit with more plaster pieces. I put a concrete floor down in the indoor habitat of the animals because it makes for easy cleaning for the keepers. Pandas in real life do prefer a little bit more of a softer floor, but concrete with an epoxy coating is used in real life as well. For the pandas to actually access the indoor area, I created a little staircase with these stone blocks. The stairs will of course keep the pandas from accessing each other's habitat, but where the stairs end, we do need a little bit of a wall. Now another reason that I wanted the staircase in the middle is to separate out the animals a bit more. I do actually want these walls to have windows, so the visitors can look into either habitat from here. Then it was time to decorate this wall a little bit, and I used these stone fences for it, as well as these decorative circles and some of the roof pieces. We don't want this pathway to just run the people into a wall, so we're getting rid of this part of the wall and cleaning up the edges of the other two pieces of wall a little bit, with, you guessed it, more plaster pieces. After that, I decided to add some lanterns to the wall as well. For the main entrance of the building, I created this canopy just using the Asian roof pieces, and I made two smaller similar versions for the entrances for the pandas. Then with the main roof, I kind of struggled a little bit with the design. I started off using these East Asian wood pieces just with some added trim. But after I finished that, I wanted it to actually stick out a little bit more, so I added an extra layer of roof pieces before adding the trim. This way I could create an increasing slope of roof, ending in a flat roof. To finish it off, I added some detailing to the corners. Then it was time to do something about these large empty white walls, because these were a bit boring like this. And I saw a lot of pictures of beautifully decorated walls on these type of buildings. I used mostly the Asian wood and some of the decorative pieces, as well as some Asian signs, to create this pattern to decorate the wall with, and I'm actually really happy with how it turned out. I also used some red beams just to add a splash of color. After I finished the design, I copied it over across the wall of the building, and I actually covered all four sides of it. Now that the walls look a little bit better, I wanted to decorate the panda entrances a little bit more with these red pillars and upside down fences. This also makes the whole building look a little bit more cohesive with the rest of it. After that, I also wanted to change the flooring inside the building to the same wooden planks that were also in the hallway. And of course we need to make these shops and stuff look a little bit more appealing. So I first made a base wall using these Asian stone walls. Then I used these shop facades. They're actually great for adding a lot of detail in one go that fit with the theme perfectly. Of course, they don't really have a similar one for the toilets, so I decided to just place a solid wall over them because the people will walk through it anyway, and then I placed a door on top of it. Now, because I hid the toilets completely now, I did want to add a sign that would point the people in the right direction. Now, as you can see, I left these holes in the wall, which is mostly because the shops didn't quite line up with the grid from the building. To cover these up, I used this wooden paneling, and I think that actually looks better than just keeping the wall a plain stone brick. Next, I added some more of the panda posters for decoration, and some lights just to make it all a little bit more cozy. After this, I was looking for a piece of decoration for next to this seating area, and I kind of got to fiddling around with these snake pieces. And when I turned them around, it actually turned into a perfect little plant pot. It did turn out to be a little bit too big for this space, but once I added some mulch and some bamboo, it was perfect to put in other places in the building. I actually think it turned out to be a really versatile piece, so I definitely saved the blueprint of that. But I still didn't have anything for in this corner, but in the end I took one of these fountain pieces and turned it upside down so it could act like a seat for the giant panda statue. I decided to use the gondola pillow and copied that over a bunch of times to create sort of like a bigger pillow for the panda to sit on. Then I copied it over to the other side to have a symmetrical decoration. Then I wanted to get started on the climbing structure for the pandas. They do actually enjoy climbing, and an enriching environment is usually recommended for them so they don't get bored. A couple months ago I went to a zoo in the Netherlands called Regenesis, and they actually have giant pandas, and they have this climbing structure that exists out of large round shapes made from planks that are connected by pathways also made from planks. And I actually used that as inspiration for this climbing structure here. Once I had one prototype circle finished, I copied 3 of them over to the inside of the habitat and once again put logs in the middle of them. Then I started connecting them using the same planks and gradually moving them upwards, kind of in a winding path. This was a little fiddly, but I did actually in the end like the look of it, although even though it says the pandas can climb on it, they actually don't. I was kind of hoping it would be an actually functional climbing structure, but it turns out the pandas in Planet Zoo don't really climb that much, unfortunately. Once I made one winding path, I did end up just copying it twice in between the other circles because of how finicky it was to just make one of them. And then I did border them all with some more wooden beams to create a little bit more structure, because right now it just seems like the planks are floating around. One of the platforms I ended up tilting a little bit to make it all connect a little bit better. Once I finished the whole climbing structure, I copied all of it over to the other habitat so it would be almost identical. Then I wanted to decorate a little bit more of the visitors area. I added some more of the potted bamboo and started lining some of the walls with this wood paneling for a little bit more of a cozy look. The white plaster walls look pretty good on the outside, but on the inside it makes the whole place just look very empty. I put these cute little statues of some baby panda bears in between these plant pots to symbolize that we do actually try to breed these pandas. Of course, if this was an actual zoo, a lot of the education would also be about this. Above the glass viewing area, I continued the wall with some more plaster and added a bunch of wooden beams to frame the window and just decorated a little more. I wasn't really sure what I wanted to do with the ceiling of this building, but it did end up being quite high, so I put in a second lower ceiling just above where the wall ends. Then it's time to finish off the framing of these windows. I did add some lighting to the ceiling as well, because we are inside here and there's not actual windows towards the outside, so it's important to pay attention to lighting, even if Planet Zoo doesn't really care. Of course, we also need plenty of education on the pandas, so I framed some screens with some more wood beams. Now, for now it looks a little bit silly because all of these education signs look the same, but I will be changing out these pictures for some pictures that I make myself, once the pandas are in. This empty wall opposite from the viewing gallery did also need some decoration, of course, so time for some more wooden beams. They are just a really good way to fix up some of these edges. Now for this lower part of the wall, I wanted to add some more of the wood paneling, once again to make it seem a little less white and sterile. For some more education and a little touch of red, I used these frames that are perfectly sized for the education screens and stuck them on the wall. Next, I added this gridded pattern onto these little walls at the end of the paths. And I used some more of this linear decoration above the education signs. I do really think that you don't need to make all these types of decorations from scratch if there's perfectly good decoration in the game. Now, as I said before, it's quite spacious up here and I'd like for people to be able to refresh themselves and enjoy a little bit of a drink here, so I added some picnic tables so they could take a seat as well. I also added some regular benches alongside the lower paths. For some final touches on the outside of the building, I added a bunch of decals to make it look a little less clean. I did still need to finish some of the outside borders to the habitat, so I continued the same Asian themed wall towards the side of the habitat. On the other side, I had to add some glass underneath the bridge because giant pandas can actually swim and we don't want them popping up in the red panda habitat. Now, these are two separate habitats, but I wanted to make it look like animals could be transported from one side to the other very easily. For this, I wanted to add a door in between the two inside areas. That of course has to be closed so the animals don't escape, but theoretically it could be opened to move the animals around. For giant pandas to breed, it is important that the female has an appropriate place to give birth as well. For this, they like to have a den. Now, this den is relatively small compared to the quite big panda size, and that is so that the mother will feel safe being surrounded by all sides except for the entrance. This makes it easier for her to defend her babies. So, the den needs to be big enough so that the female can comfortably enter and stand up in it, but not a lot bigger than that. It's usually best to make the den a circular shape because the babies from giant pandas are very small and sometimes they can get accidentally trapped into a corner by the large body of the mother. But if there are no corners, this issue gets a lot smaller. I will also give this den a back entrance for the staff so that they can have access to the cubs in case of emergency. I make this entrance with just some hinges and some European flag poles to simulate a door. Of course, I also added some bedding to it, and I added a bunch of straw bedding to the rest of the indoor habitats. Now that the inside is mostly done, I started doing some terrain work on the outside of the habitats, just to give it a little bit more of an interesting texture. I also added a little water pond in the second habitat, because giant pandas do actually like playing in water. It's also an important sign that the female is getting ready to breed when she starts playing more with water. With the terrain brush, I just layered mostly soil and short grass on top of each other, just like the pandas like. And then it was slowly time to start decorating the outside of the habitats. Now, for everyone who's seen my last video about the red pandas, this is gonna be kind of similar to that. The reason for that is that I do want this area to have one cohesive look, because it is, after all, one large building with the surrounding gardens. Also, the red panda and the giant panda live in similar areas and actually do prefer the same type of plants. So, just like with the red pandas, I start off by adding a bunch of ivy on the outside wall and also in the inside area. Next, I added a bunch of rock formations around, mostly by sinking in these rocks until only a smaller part of it was showing. I added some reeds along the waterline and some water lilies, and added a bunch of leaf litter around the rocks. As I already mentioned last time, I would prefer to use the tropical leaf litter, but the pandas just don't like it because technically it's a tropical plant. So I'm gonna settle for this one, even though it's a lot brighter in color. Next, of course, it's time for some bamboo. If you imagine a panda, it is in a bamboo forest, and that's not without reason. It is also their main source of food, so I have to add a good amount of bamboo. Speaking of food, I added this food platform right next to the pathway where the guests are, so they can have a nice look at them when they're eating. I also put down this other feeder inside this tree. I added some trees, some of which are scratching trees and actually count as enrichment items, and also just some regular trees. Lastly, just like with the red pandas, I added a bunch of cowberry bushes in both colors that I layered on top of each other. And with that, our habitats are finished. Let's take a little tour across the panda building. First, you enter onto this little bridge from which you can see both the red panda and the giant panda habitat. Next, you enter the red panda habitat and you can have a good look of them in their indoor area. When you walk across this pathway, you have a really good look from the giant panda habitat and from their feeding platform. Then when you go up these stairs, you have the first look of the indoor area from the pandas, and it's often a very good place to view them. Then you enter this little gathering area. You can get a drink or some food, go to the bathroom maybe, and you can have a very good view of the pandas in both their indoor habitats. You can even enjoy one of the animal talks here. Once you've decided that you've seen enough of them, you can exit through these stairs, where you get one last look at the outdoor habitats of the pandas. Of course, you can also go through the whole building the opposite way if that happens to be the route that you were taking. The giant pandas love engaging in the water. They actually swim quite a bit, more than you'd expect them to, and they do use the climbing structure a little bit. They get up to the first platform, and I do have some enrichment items there that they tend to engage with, so that is quite fun. In the end, I did end up moving the two of them to the other habitat because it's just a little bit bigger and that helps their welfare just a little bit. I'm hoping it will help with the breeding. They are notoriously hard to breed with, both in real life and in Planet Zoo, so unfortunately we haven't had any babies yet. But the pandas seem to be getting along quite well, so that is quite promising. And here we have one of the pandas just chewing away at a little midday snack. I really think these animals are adorable. And as you can see, when they're eating at the feeding platform, the guests can have a look very close up. I hope you all really enjoyed watching this. I definitely enjoyed building this. It's probably the most thematically decorated building that I've ever made in Planet Zoo, and I'm quite happy with it. Next time, I think it's time to tackle the other side of the entrance building, because that is unfortunately still empty. I hope you will all join me for that, but until then, have a nice day. Bye!